Part of the reason I wanted to record this is because many people have expressed curiosity about exactly the stuff we're going to be talking today, and it's getting to be unsustainable, like doing the same, the same demo over and over. So I think probably in the future we should take more time during these Aegean syncs to section off a recording section and then publish it somewhere. But for this one, we'll just do it improv. So I'm recording now.
Okay, cool. All right, I guess I'll share my screen.
Yep.
Okay, and then this button here hides the video. Thank you, Gather. Okay. All right, so what you're looking at now is a shrub renderer that I've been working on called Sky. Sky's job is to compose one or zero or more hawks. And a hawk is this square here that contains the shrub. So you can view multiple hawks at the same time. This is viewing 3 of them. And the metaphor is that, the hawks are looking down at the trees and the hawks live in the sky. So a hawk is something that views a tree, some tree in the shrubbery namespace. You can kind of control how many of the hawks you're viewing at any given time, and that little thing goes there. Let's find the diary shrub. There's kind of a lot of them in here right now because I'm not hiding the system level shrubs anymore because of something I'll talk about in a second. But I have this shrub at Faz Diary, and this is a diary shrub, and it provides an interface to itself, and you can interact with it on its own terms. You can create hello Aegean team, create little diary entries. So basically this is a shrub application, and it's providing an interface to this Sky browser through the conversion system in Shrubbery, which is super cool because in order to get a rich interface like this, you don't need to do any JSON encoding or JavaScript. You can just write your interface as Sail and then use some HTML attribute properties to specify, okay, when I click this button, go grab this other shrub and then replace it in the DOM tree at this other certain location. So you build up your application logic by defining interface swaps, which is a bit different than how you would do it in a React application, but it's really nice because you can server render everything and it ends up being really snappy and a lot simpler because you're not syncing state between the front end and the back end as much as you would need to. So there's also this top bar up here on the hawk, which lets you move it around in the interface. So this will move it down the stack one, the left one moves it up the stack. You can clone it with the C, you can minimize it, and you can close it. So let's bring that back up. This menu here is kind of like a context menu for the hawk. And this is where we're going to start putting some of the more DevX affordances. So the only thing we have so far is this link to the implementation of whatever type is at this node. So the type of Faz Diary is this diary stud. Stud in Shrubbery is like a mark kind of. So I can view the implementation of diary just by pulling it up, and it will navigate in another window, in another hawk, to the implementation code. And then Liam wrote this nice kind of like hooks into the dot chords of the Hoon and like finds which protocols are being used. So you can kind of explore the documentation and the implementation of your of your shrubbery with buttons, basically. So this is working towards an environment which, yes, FASPAT means import a conversion file. Conversion files import a protocol. Protocols are studs, basically, marks. I can show maybe a conversion. Let's do con diary. So this file here is how I'm rendering the diary. Eventually this will be editable, and what I was trying to say before was this is working towards a future where this is an entire IDE, so you can edit your files in here, save them, and then maybe click a button to refresh, and then you have an interactive development environment where you're just editing code in your browser. And I guess I've been kind of thinking about this path since I started working on IS, like, I don't know, maybe 7 months ago or something like that, 8 months ago now, however long ago it was. And finally with Shrubbery, it is starting to make sense in a way that I could actually see real teams making real applications inside of an environment like this, especially once some of the software, collaborative software editing tools and more of like a Urbit side Git gets built into this, which is something we definitely want to do eventually. And what else is there? There's this Z menu, which I've not yet implemented, which will auto create an interface to any nodes that might be children of this node. And it will kind of do, it'll do an interface that's more of like a developer focused interface or like a power user. It won't be as custom as something like this. Like the developer of the diary app made this interface, but the interface that shows up here will be kind of like an auto-generated interface to all of the children, and maybe it will let you do some admin actions on them that you wouldn't be able to do through this interface. And what's nice is for most users, we can probably just hide that option and it won't be that important for them. And yeah, I think that's basically all I have to say now. Are there any questions or parts about this that don't quite make sense yet?
Sure, this looks fine. I guess now I'm kind of curious what the actual code looks like underlying this concept.
Yeah, great question. So Sky itself is a shrub. So this interface is being rendered by a conversion between the Sky type and HTML, and it's providing this interface, which then provides interface to its children. So let's see if I can pull up that code. It will be a con Sky. So this is converting between the Sky shrub and HTMX, which is kind of like a rendering node. You provide some arms which let you specify what theme you have, and basically just returns a JavaScript custom web component called Sky.
Or is that an arg to FASPAT, I guess?
I think the way it works is you define your input type and your output type. I don't actually know if I understand the question. Like no composition?
Well, I'm just like with a Tizgal or something. I just don't. I guess that colhep. Oh no, sorry, I'm misreading. It's a colhep of a cell and the remainder. I thought the colhep was just applying to Sky and HTMX. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, this is just saying the rest of this file is what you need to convert between Sky and HTMX. Yeah, and then the actual interface just describes some sail, which eventually, when rendered, turns into what you're seeing here. And I can show the code for like the implementation of a diary, which could be cool. Imp diary. So each of these shrubs has a state arm, a poke arm, some kids, some dependencies, and then some initialization and or some, I guess, some logic, some life cycle. So the diary, its state is going to be the protocol called diary. The protocol of diary, let's pull it up. The protocol of diary it just has a name. So I'm not actually displaying the name here. And its kids are some node that has a txt state and is named with a patda. So let's move this one back there. So its children have the name of a patda and the type of txt. And then it takes in a poke called a diary diff. So when I submit this form here, the form gets turned into a diary diff and then put into this poke arm, which then resolves the diary diff and applies the state. And that's basically all you need to do to make applications. You write your implementation file, you write the protocols that you need. Most of the time, the protocols that you need will already have been defined. And we're working on building out basically a subset of them that will cover a lot of general use cases. Like now I have this txt stud here, this protocol txt. Lots of applications will be able to reuse that txt stud, and it will come with all of the renderers that we've created for them. And you'll be able to kind of mix and match them, and app development will turn more into like, okay, which types don't already have definitions and conversions? Let me make those files. And then you just write an implementation that kind of pieces them together, and that's it. This form is also auto-saving, which is cool. If I can just edit it, boom, boom, boom.
Part of the developer story that I feel like you might have understated, but like, okay, so these protocols are very simple, right? And they define a lot about what you need to know. So they define the shape of your state. They also define like the exact pokes that you might want to send, which is like usually what developers are looking for. So like if you look at the protocols of diary and you click on diary diff, for example, which we haven't touched yet, you could see right here, like, okay, as a third party, this is how I change diary. And, the names are informative in this case. Usually they are. And yeah, you can send Dojo pokes now. You could start building an app that extends this, an app that implements this. Everything is just right here for you in 4 lines of code. So, the mark system from Clay, the way I see it is the 2 roles have been divided now. There's, giving, a nominative layer over types, which is our protocols. And then there's a conversion system, which is now fully independent and UI compatible. So you can use these conversions in a much more modular form. You can still do your same like Clay tube data pipelines by constructing conversions, but you can also use these conversions to render your UIs. And you can put your conversions entirely within that. You can put your UI entirely within that conversion. And you can mix and match them. They can have knowledge of each other, and you can put the conversion for some other type into a higher level conversion that embeds the lower levels.
So let me pull up a conversion file and maybe talk about it a bit more. Yeah, let's talk about the iframe conversion, and I can show boom. Okay, so I have this iframe protocol, and the way that it renders, this is actually from node to iframe. I want iframe to HTMX. So when it gets rendered, it just has the HTML for the iframe, and it sticks in the source, which is the only thing that is in the state of the iframe. So at this node, I just have a chord that tells me where to point. When it gets converted, it just wraps it in an interface. And I can now put this iframe node anywhere in any application, give it a chord, and it will render correctly. Stack.
Would it be possible, I mean, I guess it would, but have you thought about, like iframe is a good case where you might want a security sandbox or something embedded on, within that? Like, have you thought at all about like what that sort of thing might look like?
No, I haven't thought about that at all. I know some people do iframes inside of iframes, which gives some security guarantee that I don't fully understand. But these are actually quite fickle. Most websites don't let you embed themselves as an iframe, but a lot of your Urbit applications should. The ship I'm running on right now doesn't have landscape installed, so I wonder if I can embed myself. Oh, no, what is it? Neo Sky. Okay, that's kind of funny.
What use is this making of the veins like air and iris at this point?
So the application that implements Neo exposes some HTTP request handlers through air using just the basic on poke HTTP request poke, basically. And Sky has a few endpoints that let you interact with Shrubs over HTTP, but it's not doing anything with Iris yet. Or maybe ever. I don't know.
I think the general answer to your question is like any kind of interaction with veins right now needs to be built into the agent shrub. And we have enough to do this kind of stuff in the browser because we put it there kind of by hand.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with it, is how does it sit VFE, the veins?
So, in theory, I can make a Postman's shrub that uses iris then, correct?
Yeah, you could definitely make a
Okay.
Postman shrub. Totally. That's a great
And that
idea.
would basically, like that, like for an example, that would be like its data is whatever the URL is I want to get, and I call iris, I get something back, and then.
I mean, you
Well,
could
yeah,
even
how-
have the
how would that
browser
work?
be the one that's doing the requests. And
I don't want the browser doing the request, right? What if I wanted my Urbit doing the request?
yeah, you could proxy through your Urbit as well, or have your Urbit
Okay.
be the main one do it. Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah, so Liam, I believe, has yet to implement a shrub that proxies cards that need to be passed outside of the shrub system. Right now, you can only pass cards within the shrub system. But yeah, I don't know. I said Liam is the one who has to do it, but he's the one who probably will end up implementing that faster than any of the rest of us. But once that's the case, yeah, you can send cards from inside of here elsewhere into the system and get stuff back. Yeah. Yeah, so for like a
I'm gonna
postman,
stop
your
the
state
screen
would just be.
recording and go into more of an open-ended discussion. So yeah, the reason that I wanted to demonstrate this to you guys at the DevX team is I think there's a lot of things here that are really promising that I would like to kind of strategize about, like, well, how do you guys think it would be best communicated? Because I mean, there's been like this pending IDE arc for a while, and I definitely think that we are like very motivated to tell the IDE story as one of the first stories we tell with this navigation experience. In addition to that, I think the composability story with like the one-to-many relationships between nodes and their conversions is really, really strong. Like if this was the bedrock of landscape at the time that Bookbar made Escape, they would have never had to make their own chat app. They would have simply just put another UI on the same agent. They wouldn't even have to install anything super special.
So, one of the efforts I've been making is to write numerics libraries. What do you see the relationship of this to libraries as looking like?
You could import a library into your implementation file and use it when you're dealing with pokes that are coming into your shrub. You could import a library into your conversion file and use the library to, do some processing on your data before it gets converted into some interface or some other shrub action. Yeah, that's all I can think of off the top of my head.
What if I have, I guess if I have like using the numerics idea, if I have what we call array, right, which is like an ND array, I would have to implement a shrub that uses the type of array and it does something with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We'd have to have a array shrub, Neil, that basically, like, say, displays array.
Well, does this end up routing around pretty printer stuff too by embedding it all in particular paths?
Yeah, to the extent that you're willing to write your own renderers for your types, then yeah, you can get around the pretty printer stuff.
That might actually be an interesting way of ripping out parts of the, parts of things that we consider, core functionality that we actually may not need to have. Some of the parsing you're going to need just because you have to be able to bootstrap a compiler, but anything that's beyond that, you may be able to push out of syshoon into something else.
Mm-hmm. And we don't really have good demos of it quite yet. But there's also the whole aspect of this Shrub browser where you're not just doing DevX or IDE type stuff, but you're like interacting with an app that's interacting with other people's Urbits in like a social way. So you're kind of putting everything into this one environment, and all of your apps, whether they're development focused or just like, your Rumors app, you can have them as tabs inside of this.
So how will Jets relate to this then? Because they have to be compiled into your binary, right?
I don't think this changes the way Jets really work at all, because we're just, it's right now it's just an agent. So everything that's already jetted is already jetted. Nothing in that has to change. There is this idea of a component jet, which right now it's basically just an HTML web component. But it allows the front end to do some operation on the tree optimistically. So instead of having to send the poke to the server, have the server do something, and then send back a new interface to be swapped in, you can, know ahead of time what operation needs to happen on the tree in the JavaScript. And then you send off the request, and then you don't really care what the response is because you already know how to change yourself. So you're like optimistically doing stuff on the front end, and it kind of is like a UI level jet, because you're just like, yeah, the Urbit needs to know about it so we can track the state, but I don't have to like wait for Urbit to tell me what to do because I already know what to do.
Yeah, it's more of an analog though, right? Because it's not going into var. The Shrub system doesn't change the concept of jets at all. We're importing the same hoon that everybody else does.
It doesn't change that, but sort of riffing off of maybe there's parts of the parser and pretty printer and stuff that we can rip out of syshoon, you may still want those things jetted. And so this FAS-PAT stuff that you're talking about probably will connect into components that need to be jetted for any reasonable speed.
Yeah, I mean, like the dojo is pretty good right now. I'm not one of the people who's unhappy with it, but if you did want to like reimagine the terminal in this environment and how you can make it better, I think there is a story to tell. It's probably a lot of work, but it's like, okay, once you've taken a type and you've elevated it to the level of a protocol by just giving it a name in the protocol system, then you can use the same native rendering system as something that approaches the terminal environment. So you would just say like, here's how I'm going to render this type as text based on the data that type contains. And yeah, that could be like that could be a way of like slotting the components of the printer out of, deeply in the core and putting it in the higher level and something that the user can mess with and install packages for, et cetera. We actually had like, Will, is this like an evolution of the old idea that you guys had from yesterday where like you were basically exploring shrubs as cores and you could see their arms?
I didn't actually demo that part. Let me demo that real fast.
Well, while he's pulling that up, where I sort of feel stuck on thinking about this with respect to DevX is not, will this enable us to build the kinds of things we want? It's sort of, it doesn't seem to me that the interface and everything is stable enough for us to start building on outside of the Aegean team right now.
No, probably not. I mean, I think if you guys wanted to develop the like IDE aspects of it, that help would certainly be welcome. But I think the reason I wanted to like more affirmatively bring this to your attention is that it is more for like just strategy wise, right? Like in terms of long-term planning. I mean, I think I definitely hear the concern about the stability of the thing. This is all really bleeding edge. And I think I kind of communicated it as such, but like, it's promising enough to know that like, this is the direction we want to go, right? We're not going to turn away from this. We're going to develop it more. So like, some aspects of the UI, some buttons might get moved, but like the fact that we have a browser that takes paths and shows us things that include Hoon, include code, and might want to write code into those nodes and have them run in other tabs, like we're going to go full speed ahead with that. That's not going away. And so like, so app school is coming up and like, definitely we're not gonna have anything ready to like do an app school for this, like with those same applicants. But then like, I think the next app school should definitely be, have like a shrub component or be shrub focused. And I think, I think there's also room to talk about like, a bonus session inside of like a forthcoming app school to say like, and I know you're looking to like the future of Urbit. Here's what, these crazy kids are experimenting with right now. Cause yeah, I mean, just in the visuals alone right now, I think there's stuff here that I've been waiting to see like since I was in app school a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I see Tinnis has joined us, and I want to show him something real quick. Basically, I want to use your Manx utils library to do src std con. So this conversion converts between a HTML node and an iframe, and this happens when when I change this path here, I can save it, and what that does is that just takes this form, serializes it as HTML, sends it back to the server. And then that HTML comes into here and gets turned into a new iframe to get, placed at that path. So basically you're updating the state of this node. And so you have to kind of like take the Manx that comes in here and reach inside of it and grab the value out of it. And right now this is kind of ugly, but Tinnis has this some Manx utils, which will make this a lot easier. We just have to have the ability to import libraries, which is currently broken. But just wanted to tell you, yeah, we're using your shit. Good work.
Nice.
Yeah, so I think like the plan in my head right now is like I really want to focus the Aegean team on like building out like the developer stories in the early stages and like try to capture like the developer audience, especially the people who are like paying really close attention to Shrub right now. I think are going to end up liking building on this more than like, you know, VS Code /Gull /whatever. And yeah, I mean, like, you know, the first release IDE Hawk, it would be really cool. And like, it definitely meets the definition of integrated, right? Like I mean, it wasn't part of the demo, but you can in fact write code into these nodes here and then, you know, and then see the results of writing that code in the other frame.
How close to something like Farcaster can you get with this? I mean, I would think pretty far.
I'll let Trent answer that. He's the one.
Well, so
yeah.
yeah, I mean, what Will is showing is like the ability for you as a developer user to compose different frames of code and preview them in that way. With something with Farcaster, I think you'd want it to be less about, well, you'd at least want a different interface for it. And so specifically what we talked about is how if you had a Twitter-like feed of potentially arbitrarily defined frames, there's still kind of an open question about like how you define the API for any given frame and how you have security, like what pokes is that frame allowed to send to your ship. And maybe Shrubbery fixes this, but I haven't put too much thought into that. So I think, Will, actually, you might have a better answer than I do, but.
Yeah, I was calling on you because you made the Gall agent for the feed, which I think soon will get turned into a Shrub. And that's, you know, pushing towards like a more social Farcaster, like, you know, sharing content around microblog style. And yeah, in my view, it's just going to be something like this diary app, but instead of being, you know, a diary app, it's some interface to a Twitter-like feed, and at the top you have a box you can type in, and below you can see posts that your friends have shared to you, and you can click on them and it'll maybe open up in the same tab or a different tab. And each of those tabs is its own Shrub, so it has all the capabilities of any Shrub. So, you know, it's
right, because I guess like as long as the feed can constrain the way that the sub-Shrub posts are displayed, and as long as any of those, well, as long as it can constrain what permissions those sub-Shrub Farcaster frames are allowed to have, then really Shrubbery does fix the security concern there, where yeah, you should be able to define any arbitrary frame, and then like who cares what that frame does if it's only concerned about its own kids.
Yeah, and a frame could even send a poke to somewhere else in the tree, even if it's not one of its kids. And as long as it conforms to the rules of whatever Shrub it's sending a poke to, it should be allowed to do that. So
yeah,
in this diary implementation, when I'm rendering the kids, let's actually go to the con.
Could you mute, please?
When I'm rendering the kids, I'm just turning by the kids in the bowl and rendering them with this link entry arm. And this link entry arm has access to the entire vase that is the kid, so it can render it however it wants to. I could just do a preview to a preview to a post that someone's put in the feed. I could show the entire feed, and I could even import its conversion in here and use its native conversion and just embed it within myself.
Right, and because that's constrained by the conversion from the feed itself to HTMX, then I guess you still have enough power over the kids to make sure they're not doing anything they shouldn't be.
I think we may not want to tell the full Farcaster story of like, you're scrolling through these frames that people have just sent to you and you're going to show whatever they've rendered. Like, I think that is more appropriate where you don't have a personal server that's connected to your personal data. Like, I think it makes sense to just say, like, if somebody sends a frame to you that represents some application they've downloaded, you also need to have that application downloaded to render it that way. Because yours, it's all going to be server-side rendered anyway. You need to have the logic for rendering it. So I think that's a cleaner story for us if we just say like, okay, I got this frame that came from this app called Turf. I don't have Turf installed, so it's rendered. I need to install Turf to view it. Otherwise, it just gives me some somewhat informative metadata. And then, I install the app, and all of a sudden now I've got the con file I need to render the frame correctly. Now I can do now I can walk around in the grid inside of my feed. I think that would be fine for most people.
Somewhat related. At this point, can you talk about what you have been thinking about mark versioning?
So we have Kelvin shims, which is so the marks that you're using, like the way that we use them here, is just a flat text string. They're associated with the Kelvin version. It's always going to associate with the Kelvin version according to what you're currently on. And you just need to be able to trust that those marks are always going to resolve, correctly according to your Kelvin. I don't think there's any kind of, I'm not sure how Kelvins are dealt with in the foreign marks case. But foreign marks are a concept that people are going to end up having to use where you're not referring to them by a flat string, but you're actually giving them a PAT-P address, and you're fetching them from a source.
Mm-hmm.
But Kelvin marks are definitely going to be upstream only. So if you have a mark that you want to be a Kelvin mark, you've got to talk to the UF developers to get it in there, write a whip or something.
Well, and this is just complicated by the shift from the reference marks are the marks on the base desk to every desk ships own marks. Which means that a mark is a metadata tag. It's a single word metadata tag, but it really could be anything.
Yeah, some of them are more
it's
complicated than a single word. Let me show you. Yeah, some of them are actual types. Oh, but you're saying the name of it. Yeah, okay, the stud.
Saying, Brett, I can build a mark that's does anything and has the same tag name.
Yeah.
Yeah, so where it says source STD, so if it's not in the standard desk, that would be like the Shrub analog of a desk, a top level folder nested within source, and your app is going to have a different name there, and you're going to reference your mark by both your PAT-P and that. So within your desk, it still is going to have the same functionality, but it's going to be a slight bit more data entry and a little bit more like visual complexity.
Mm-hmm.
Probably there should be some kind of sugar for the ship in desk that I belong to, find the mark from that.
Well, it's like faz tis, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to show you. I mean, I hope you guys are a little excited about it. I think it's like one of the coolest things ever.
It's nice. It's nice that it takes us in the direction of urban, right? Like,
Yeah.
Like it sort of hasn't, building in static gall is not really fun. Actually, while I'm thinking about it, have you thought about data flow and PubSub with respect to shrubbery?
Yeah, we have a pretty good pub subsystem. So we have it's explicit data dependencies that work effectively as like a list of symlinks or a set of symlinks that exist in your kind of metadata. It ends up in the bowl, and it's assumed to always be up to date. It's blocking if you haven't received any updates, but the system
Is this based on Excel?
No, this is like very core to Shrub is so a Shrub core is 5 arms. One of them is depths, and depths is going to give you is going to be a map from term to a bunch of data. I forget what the name is, but yeah, you could fairly like easily use got by within that face within your bowl and get up to date data for whatever you're depending on. So it's kind of like, it's one line to do all of the stuff that people are normally doing with subscriptions, which is, just keeping a set of data up to date. There's also a special kind of poke that can come in, which is if you want to do something when that source of data gets updated, you have this special rely poke that works the same as if you want to take an action upon getting a fact. So it's definitely first class. I would argue it's actually more first class PubSub is here than in Gall, because it's still handled by the system, and now you have like a specific like an arm of the core dedicated to handling your subscriptions, and constraining their behavior as well. So you can ensure that your data dependencies meet a certain description and fail to create the node if it's unable to satisfy that data dependency.
Well, that works for me.
Cool. Any other questions?
I guess one of the things that's going to arise, and it's probably way too early to really do anything concrete with this because we don't know enough about what things are going to look like when this is through its research arc. But building large applications is going to be an interesting kind of almost like a clockwork machine of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'm most excited about here, and maybe we'll get a chance to explore it a little bit as we're developing more prototypes, but I think that Spider is not the best model for dealing with intermediate state. And I think we can make intermediate state much more legible and easily debuggable by just using like first-class nodes that are treated as disposable. Because these shrub nodes can be as large or big as you want them to be. They're kind of optimized more for like being small and having complexity contained in kind of subdirectories within the node. And so, in a lot of cases where you want intermediate state, you actually have a pretty small amount of it, and it's fine to give it a name. So you can make that a lot more legible and catch the special cases that might occur through an interface like this, right, where you're just kind of browsing into the child and seeing what it's stated. So like, I think when I conceive of like a large protocol or like a complex protocol, what I'm thinking about is like, okay, there's a lot of special kinds of intermediate state, and you really want like tightly fitting abstractions around them. I think one of the biggest problems with doing that on Urbit is like all you get are agents and threads. Those are the only stateful things that you're allowed to have. And so you only get one agent per protocol. So, if you don't want to make that complex and messy, then you need to do a lot with threads, and then those are very hard to debug. And that's like that's one of the patterns that people fall into most harmfully when they're trying to build really grandiose stuff in Gall. I think, I suspect that the ability to make like very specifically designated subnodes to handle very specifically defined tasks is going to be really handy.
I mean, in some sense, this is almost a recovery of object-oriented programming.
Yeah. A shrub is a type that is alive. It's a,
Yeah. Type with a
you
life
take a
cycle.
type and it's a living type. And that's kind of what an object is. Well, yeah, it's more agent-oriented programming, right? That's kind of what that is. And yeah, it's kind of like, maybe it's like, agent-oriented programming within within a tree, like that follows this of how to think about parentage and cousins, kind of like agnostic towards cousins, but very dogmatic about children is the kind of the shrub mentality. So it's like, it's a constraining tree framework for agent-oriented programming is like maybe a good way to communicate this model. And then, yeah, I would say that object-oriented programming already kind of had an answer in agent-oriented programming, and it just never really found I think you really want like an all-encompassing system like Urbit/Shrub to make agent-oriented programming make the most sense.
Yeah, like you said the other day, Gary, that one good rule for writing shrubs is never write maps, because something that could be a map should instead be, well, a map of path to shrub. And I think that's almost right. I would say it's more like never write, like if you write a map and then you have a bunch of arms for performing operations on that map, it probably makes more sense to encapsulate that logic within each item of the map rather than manipulating the map as a collection. And I think that's what makes Shrubbery feel really nice, is that you can just tell each element of the map, okay, perform this operation on yourself. And then that logic lives within the element itself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, I don't think never write maps should be like a rule for writing shrubs. I think never write maps is like my best 3-word explanation for like why programming in shrubs is better, because every agent that does anything interesting has a map in its state. That's usually where everything happens. And so like saying like, okay, you're never going to write a map, it's like a very succinct way to express a lot about how programming is different here.
Right.
All right.
Thanks for
All right.
hanging out.
Yeah, thanks. Bye. So I still kind of wanted to do some live coding today, but I think we only have a little bit of time left in the meeting.